You don't wake up one day and suddenly lose control of your life. It happens quietly, gradually, almost politely. You say something you shouldn't have said. You react when you should have paused. You spend money to feel better, just for a moment. You lie awake at night, trapped inside your own thoughts. And you tell yourself it's normal. Everyone does it. It's just stress, just life. But deep down, you feel it. Something is off. You feel pulled instead of grounded, reactive instead of deliberate, busy yet drifting, alive but not in command. The Stoics understood this long before modern life distracted us. They warned that freedom isn't taken from you by force. It's surrendered through lack of self-control. Because the truth is uncomfortable. If you don't control your mouth, your mood, your money, and your mind, they will quietly decide who you become. Not all at once, but day by day, choice by choice. This video is not here to motivate you. It's here to wake you up, to help you reclaim authority over yourself, to replace reaction with discipline, chaos with clarity, weakness with quiet strength. Because the highest form of power isn't domination over others. It's a command over yourself. Control your mouth. Silence is power. Most people don't lose respect because they lack intelligence. They lose it because they talk too much. They speak when they're emotional. They explain when no explanation is required. They react when silence would have been strength. And every unnecessary word leaks power. You've felt this before. The moment after you said too much, the message you sent too fast, the argument you didn't need to win, but couldn't resist. Silence would have protected you, but the impulse exposed you. Stoicism begins with a hard truth. Your mouth reveals your level of self-mastery. A disciplined mind produces disciplined speech. An undisciplined mind spills itself everywhere. When you speak without control, you hand your emotional state to the world. You announce your fears. You reveal your insecurities. You give others leverage. This is why silence is not passive. Silence is active restraint. It's the pause between stimulus and response. And inside that pause lives your power. Most people fear silence because silence feels like emptiness. But for the Stoic, silence is structure. It creates space to think. It forces others to show their intentions. It keeps your dignity intact. Notice how arguments escalate. One sharp sentence invites another. Emotion feeds emotion. Before long, the conversation isn't about truth. It's about ego. Silence breaks that chain. When you don't react, you remove fuel from the fire. When you don't explain, you refuse the courtroom. When you don't complain, you keep your authority. This doesn't mean you become mute. It means you become selective. Stoic silence is not avoidance. It's precision. You speak when your words serve a purpose, not when they serve your emotions. Ask yourself this before you speak. Does this need to be said? Does this need to be said now? Does this need to be said by me? If the answer is no, silence is the correct response. Think about how often people speak just to relieve inner tension. They talk to discharge anxiety. They vent to feel lighter. They overshare to feel seen. But relief is not power. Temporary release often creates permanent consequences. Once words leave your mouth, you cannot retrieve them. You can apologize, but you cannot undo impact. The Stoics understood that restraint builds reputation. People trust those who don't speak impulsively. They listen to those who don't waste words. They respect those who don't need to dominate every conversation. Silence makes your words heavier. When you speak less, people pay more attention when you finally do speak. Your words carry intention instead of noise. And here is something most people miss. Silence exposes others. When you stop filling the space, others rush to fill it for you. They explain themselves. They reveal motivations. They show their hands. Silence turns you from participant into observer, and the observer always has the advantage. This is especially important when emotions are high. Anger wants expression, ego wants defense, fear wants reassurance. But reacting while emotional means you are no longer in control. You are being pulled. Stoicism demands that you slow this down, not suppress the emotion, but delay expression. Emotion loses strength when it is not immediately fed. A few seconds of silence can prevent years of regret. That pause is training. You are teaching yourself that feelings do not dictate behavior, that impulses do not command action, that you are not a slave to what you feel in the moment. Silence is how you reclaim authority. Notice powerful people. They don't rush to respond. They don't explain themselves endlessly. They don't argue with everyone who challenges them. They choose when to speak and when not to. Not because they are superior, but because they are disciplined. You don't need the last word. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to defend your choices to people who don't respect them. Every unnecessary explanation places you beneath the judgment of others. Stoic silence says, I stand by my actions. I don't need approval. There will be moments when silence feels uncomfortable, when your mind screams to react, when your ego demands expression. That discomfort is not a signal to speak. It's a signal that discipline is being built. Growth often feels like restraint. The goal is not to become cold or distant. The goal is to become intentional. When you do speak, speak calmly. Speak briefly. Speak from principle, not emotion. Let your tone be steady. Let your words be minimal. Let your presence carry weight. Over time, something changes. People stop trying to provoke you. They stop testing your boundaries. They stop assuming access to your emotional reactions. Because they realize you're not easily moved, and that is power. Not loud power, not aggressive power. Quiet power, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Silence is not empty. Silence contains strength. And when your mouth is under control, everything else becomes easier to master. Control your mood. Emotions are signals, not commands. Your mood decides more than you think. It decides how you speak, how you spend, how you judge yourself, how you treat others. And most people let it run wild. They wake up already irritated. One message ruins their focus. One comment shifts their confidence. One inconvenience hijacks their entire day. They say, that's just how I feel. But Stoicism cuts through that excuse with precision. Feeling something is human. Obeying it blindly is a choice. Your mood is not your enemy, but it is not your leader either. The problem is not emotion itself. The problem is identification. The moment you say, I am angry, instead of, I feel anger, you've already lost ground. You've fused your identity with a passing internal state, and once emotions become identity, they gain authority. Stoics understood this danger. They observed that emotions arrive automatically, but behavior does not have to follow. Anger shows up. Fear shows up. Frustration shows up, but none of them carry orders. They carry information, a signal, not a command. Most people confuse intensity with importance. If something feels strong, they assume it must be acted on, but intensity only means activation, not truth. An emotion can be loud and still wrong. When you let your mood dictate your actions, you surrender control to the most unstable force inside you. Moods change hourly. Principles don't. This is why Stoicism anchors behavior to values, not feelings. Ask yourself honestly, how many problems in your life were created not by what happened, but by how you reacted emotionally to what happened? A sharp reply, an impulsive decision, a day ruined by one moment. Emotion promised relief, but delivered damage. Stoics trained themselves to create distance between feeling and action, not suppression, not denial. distance. That space is where power lives. When you feel anger rising, the untrained mind says, "Express it." The Stoic mind asks, "What is this emotion trying to tell me?" Anger often signals a perceived boundary violation. Fear signals uncertainty. Sadness signals loss. Useful data, if you observe it. Destructive force, if you obey it. You don't extinguish emotion by fighting it. You weaken it by not feeding it. Every time you react immediately, you reinforce the emotion's authority. Every time you pause, you reclaim yours. This is why Stoics practiced mental restraint daily. They knew discipline wasn't built in calm moments. It was built when emotions surged. When someone disrespects you, emotion urges retaliation. When plans collapse, emotion urges despair. When outcomes disappoint, emotion urges self-pity. But none of those reactions improve the situation. They only satisfy the emotions temporarily and cost you clarity long-term. Here is the uncomfortable truth. If other people can control your mood, they can control your behavior. And if they can control your behavior, they can influence your decisions, your reputation, and your future. That is not freedom. Stoic emotional mastery begins with one rule. You are responsible for your response, not your reaction. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. The gap between them may only be a few seconds, but those seconds define character. When something triggers you, slow down, not outwardly, inwardly. Notice the sensation, tight chest, racing thoughts, heat in the body. Don't judge it, don't narrate it, just observe. The moment you observe an emotion, you stop being fully consumed by it. It becomes something you experience, not something you are. This shift alone weakens its grip. Then ask one question. What action aligns with my values, not my mood? Not what feels good, not what feels justified. What aligns with who you are training yourself to become? This is where most people fail. They know what the disciplined response would be, and still choose the emotional one. Why? Because discipline is uncomfortable in the short term, but chaos is expensive in the long term. Stoicism chooses long-term strength over short-term relief. Controlling your mood does not mean you become emotionless. It means emotions stop steering the wheel. You still feel anger, but you don't let it speak for you. You still feel fear, but you don't let it decide for you. You still feel sadness, but you don't drown in it. You acknowledge, you process, you act deliberately. This creates emotional stability, not emotional numbness. And stability is magnetic. People trust those who don't swing wildly. They follow those who stay grounded under pressure. They respect those who don't collapse emotionally when things go wrong. More importantly, you trust yourself. You stop fearing your own reactions. You stop apologizing for emotional outbursts. You stop cleaning up messes created by your moods. That is freedom. Understand this. Your mood is shaped by your internal dialogue. The stories you tell yourself determine how you feel. Untrained minds narrate constantly. They disrespected me. This always happens to me. I can't handle this. Each sentence fuels emotion. Stoics challenge these narratives. They replace exaggeration with accuracy, catastrophe with proportion, drama with reality, not optimism, precision. Because exaggerated thoughts produce exaggerated emotions, and exaggerated emotions destroy judgment. A disciplined mood is built by disciplined thinking, and disciplined thinking is built through practice. Daily practice. Not when things are easy, but especially when they are not. You won't master your mood overnight, but every time you choose response over reaction, you gain ground. You become harder to provoke, slower to anger, faster to recover. Life stops tossing you around. Your inner state becomes stable, even when circumstances aren't. And once your mood is under control, your words sharpen, your decisions improve, your energy returns. Because nothing drains a person faster than being at the mercy of their own emotions. Control your mood, and you take back ownership of your life. Control your money. Where your money goes, your life follows. Money reveals discipline faster than almost anything else. You can hide insecurity with words. You can mask emotional instability with charm. But money never lies. It shows what you value, what you fear, what you avoid, and how much control you truly have over yourself. Most people say money isn't important, but their stress says otherwise. They live one unexpected expense away from panic, one missed paycheck away from fear, one desire away from debt. Not because they are unlucky, but because they lack self-command. Stoicism never taught that money is evil. It taught something more dangerous to the ego. Money is neutral, but lack of discipline turns it into a master. If you don't control your money controls your options. And when your options shrink, so does your freedom. Look closely at how people spend. They don't spend according to values. They spend according to emotion. Stress triggers spending. Boredom triggers spending. Insecurity triggers spending. Money becomes a tool for emotional regulation. Buy something to feel better. Upgrade to feel important. Consume to escape discomfort. But relief bought with money is short-lived. The bill lasts longer than the feeling. Stoics warned against this pattern. They understood that chasing pleasure through consumption creates dependency, not satisfaction. Every time you use money to soothe emotion, you reinforce weakness. You teach yourself that discomfort must be escaped, not endured. And endurance is the foundation of strength. Stoic financial control begins with a mental shift. Money is not for comfort. Money is for stability. Comfort makes you soft. Stability makes you free. Most people confuse wealth with freedom. They are not the same. Wealth without discipline increases anxiety. Freedom comes from low dependency, not high income. If your lifestyle requires constant income to sustain, you're not free. You're fragile. The Stoics practiced voluntary simplicity for a reason, not to glorify poverty, but to reduce fear. When you need less, you fear less. When you fear less, you think clearly, and clarity is power. Ask yourself honestly, how many financial decisions have you made not because they were necessary, but because they were emotionally convenient? Subscriptions you don't use, purchases you justified, debt you normalized. Each one quietly trains you to avoid discipline, and avoidance always has a cost. Financial stress doesn't come from lack of money alone. It comes from lack of control. Two people can earn the same amount. One sleeps peacefully. The other lies awake at night. The difference is not income. It's command. Command over impulse. Command over desire. Command over ego. Stoic control of money is not about restriction. It's about alignment. You decide in advance what matters. Then you spend accordingly, not reacting at the moment. Not negotiating with temptation. Not justifying afterward. Impulse spending is a form of emotional leakage. It's the financial version of speaking without restraint. And like uncontrolled speech, it erodes respect, especially self-respect. Every unnecessary purchase is a vote against discipline. Every delayed gratification is a vote for strength. You don't build freedom by earning more alone. You build it by needing less and managing better. This is why Stoics emphasized preparation over indulgence. They asked, what if tomorrow is harder than today? What if comfort disappears? What remains? A person who has trained simplicity remains calm. A person addicted to consumption panics. Money should give you leverage, not anxiety. And leverage comes from margin. Margin is created when you spend less than you earn, plan for uncertainty, and refuse to inflate your lifestyle with every increase. This is unglamorous. It is quiet. It is rarely praised. But it is powerful. Because when you control your money, you control your time. You are less desperate, less reactive, less manipulable. Desperation makes people compromise values. Stability allows integrity. Think about how many people stay in situations they hate because they can't afford to leave. They tolerate disrespect. They accept pressure. They silence themselves, not because they are weak, but because they are financially trapped. Stoicism aims to remove that trap, not by luxury, but by self-restraint. You don't need to become a monk. You need to become intentional. Before spending, ask yourself, does this support my stability? Does this align with my long-term goals? Or is this just emotion asking for relief? If it's a relief, pause. Relief fades. Consequences compound. Delayed spending trains patience. Patience trains discipline. Discipline builds confidence. You begin to trust yourself. You stop fearing your impulses because you no longer obey them. This doesn't mean you never enjoy money. It means enjoyment is chosen, not compulsive. Enjoyment without guilt, because it was planned, earned, and aligned. That is the Stoic way. Money becomes calm, predictable, supportive, not a source of shame, not a source of panic. And here is the deeper truth most people avoid. When your finances are chaotic, your mind cannot be fully calm. Worry hums in the background. Decisions feel heavier. Risks feel terrifying. Control your money, and mental clarity follows. Because stability removes noise. Once money is under control, you are under more pressure. Harder to rush, harder to manipulate. You can say no without fear. You can walk away without panic. That is real power. Not flashy, not loud, quiet, unshakable. Control your money, and you stop being owned by the future. Control your mind. Discipline your thoughts, or lose yourself. Everything ends in the mind. Every reaction, every habit, every failure to change. If your mouth, mood, and money are out of control, the source is almost always here. Your mind. Most people believe their thoughts are who they are, so they obey them automatically. Every doubt feels like the truth. Every fear feels like a warning. Every negative story feels personal. But Stoicism teaches a ruthless distinction. You experience thoughts. You are not your thoughts. Lose that distinction, and you lose yourself. The mind is the most powerful tool you possess, and the most dangerous weapon when undisciplined. Left untrained, it turns inward. It loops. It exaggerates. It sabotages. Overthinking is not intelligence. It is a lack of control. A restless mind creates imaginary problems, then reacts to them as if they were real. You replay conversations that already ended. You worry about outcomes that haven't arrived. You argue with people who aren't present, and all of it drains you. Stoics understood that a chaotic mind can ruin even a successful life. That's why mental discipline was not optional. It was survival. The first principle of controlling the mind is simple, but uncomfortable. Not every thought deserves your attention. Thoughts appear automatically. Attention is a choice. Most people never make that choice consciously. They chase every thought like it's urgent, but urgency does not equal importance. A disciplined mind learns to filter. When a thought arises, ask, is this useful? Is this actionable? Is this within my control? If the answer is no, the thought does not deserve residence. You don't fight it. You don't analyze it endlessly. You let it pass. The mind weakens when starved of attention. Obsessive thinking survives on engagement. Remove engagement, and it loses power. This is why Stoics emphasized returning to the present. The present is the only place action exists. The past cannot be corrected. The future cannot be controlled, yet the undisciplined mind lives everywhere except now. It lives in regret and anxiety, and both are forms of mental disobedience. You are giving your energy to things that cannot respond. Mental control means repeatedly pulling yourself back to what can be done now. One task, one decision, one deliberate action. This is not passivity. This is focus. Focus is mental strength in motion. A focused mind does not eliminate negative thoughts. It outworks them. Action is the antidote to mental chaos. Overthinking thrives in stillness without purpose. Movement dissolves it, but not frantic movement, intentional movement. Stoics trained the mind through routine, simple, repeatable actions that anchor attention. When the mind wanders, the body grounds it. That is why discipline of the body supports discipline of thought. An undisciplined life produces an undisciplined mind, and the mind will always follow the structure you give it. Another hidden danger is internal dialogue. The way you speak to yourself shapes your emotional and behavioral limits. An untrained mind speaks in absolutes. I always fail. This never works. I can't handle this. These statements feel convincing because they repeat. But repetition is not truth. It is conditioning. Stoics challenged their thoughts with the same rigor they challenged circumstances. They replaced exaggeration with accuracy. Not, "This is unbearable," but "This is uncomfortable." Not, "I can't do this," but "This is difficult, but possible." This isn't positive thinking. It's precise thinking. Precision reduces emotional load. Drama increases it. Your mind becomes calmer when your thoughts become accurate. Another critical discipline is input control. What you allow into your mind determines what your mind produces. Constant news, endless social comparison, continuous noise. This is not information, it is mental pollution. A polluted mind cannot be calm or decisive. Stoics were selective about influences because they understood contagion. Your thoughts are shaped by what you consume. If you want a disciplined mind, you must limit what feeds it. This is not avoidance, it is defense. You guard your body from poison. Guard your mind the same way. Silence is not emptiness for the mind, it is recovery. Stillness allows thoughts to settle. Without stillness, your mind never resets. It stays reactive. Mental strength is not built by stimulation, it is built by restraint. Another overlooked aspect of mental control is acceptance. Many mental battles exist because you are fighting reality. You argue with what already is. The Stoic mind accepts facts quickly so it can move forward effectively. Acceptance is not surrender. It is alignment. You stop wasting energy resisting reality and redirect it toward response. Once the mind accepts, it can act clearly. Resistance creates noise. Acceptance creates clarity, and clarity restores power. Understand this clearly. A mind without discipline becomes a liability. It drains energy. It weakens resolve. It magnifies fear. But a disciplined mind becomes an anchor. It keeps you steady when emotions surge, when money pressures, when words tempt reaction. Everything depends on the mind. That's why Stoics trained it daily, not with theories, but with practice. Observation instead of reaction. Precision instead of drama. Action instead of rumination. You will not silence your mind completely. That was never the goal. The goal is command. You decide which thoughts stay, which thoughts leave, which thoughts guide action. And when the mind is under control, everything else follows, because the mind is the source. Discipline it, and you stop being dragged by life. You begin to direct it. You don't lose your life in one dramatic moment. You lose it in fragments. In other words, you didn't restrain. In the emotions you let drive, in the money you spent without intention, in the thoughts you are allowed to run unchecked. That is how control slips away. Quietly. Stoicism does not promise an easier life. It offers something far more valuable. Command. Command over your mouth, so your words protect your dignity instead of exposing your impulses. Command over your mood, so emotions inform you but never rule you. Command over your money, so your future is built deliberately, not negotiated in panic. Command over your mind, so your inner world becomes a place of clarity or not chaos. This is not about perfection. You will still feel anger. You will still feel fear. You will still feel temptation. The difference is this. You no longer obey them automatically. You pause. You choose. You act from principle. That pause, that moment of restraint, is where self-mastery lives. Most people search for power outside themselves. Status, influence, control over others. The Stoics saw through that illusion. Real power is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't collapse under pressure. It shows up in restraint, in consistency, in the ability to remain steady when everything else pulls at you. You don't need to fix everything at once. That's another trap of the undisciplined mind. Choose one area, one habit, one moment today where you pause instead of react. That is how this begins. Control is not claimed in speeches. It is earned in small, repeated decisions. And as those decisions accumulate, something changes. You stop feeling pushed by life. You stop feeling scattered. You stop feeling owned by forces you don't respect. You stand grounded, deliberate, unmoved. Control yourself, and nothing outside you can truly rule you. That is the Stoic path.